This is Chill Bill coming at you live from Cathro, introducing another segment of the 10th anniversary celebration of Skylanders Portal Casters. Over to you, Inklander.
Thanks, Chill Bill. And now, as a special surprise for this 10th anniversary episode, we have an interview with I-Wei Huang, the character and toy director for the Toys for Bob Skylanders games, joining us. So, welcome. It's an absolute pleasure to have you with us.
Yes,
Well,
welcome to the show.
thanks for having me on. This is cool.
It's great to be celebrating 10 years of the franchise, and while it's on hiatus and we haven't really seen much of it since 2017, it's just wonderful to reflect back on like all the fun times, all the great characters, all the stories, everything like that about the franchise. So it's great.
It's crazy that it's been 10 years. It feels like yesterday. At the same time, it feels like felt like a lifetime ago.
I mean, it does kind of feel like I just got into it, but also it is kind of crazy where it's like, wow, there hasn't been like a new game in like 5 years.
Right.
Kind of crazy. We wanted to just kind of ask you about your time with the franchise and some of the places that you drew inspiration from. So, and that's pretty much our first question to you is what do you draw upon for inspiration when it comes time to draw a new character?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. So I guess there's several fronts. One is definitely from nature. I was definitely one of those kids that like just watched tons of nature shows, about animals and stuff. So as you can tell from a lot of the characters and a lot of the creatures and dragons and stuff are kind of real life animal inspired. Either from present time or prehistoric kind of thing. Even a lot of the ambient creatures, there's like these flying fish-like things and, the different creatures like that. Let's see, my art influences, definitely Miyazaki stuff, Ian McKeag, which is just an amazing concept artist who worked on tons of movies. And I would say a lot of it actually is probably inspired by Dr. Slump. the like, super deformed kind of style. It's like there's definitely a lot of inspiration from that. So yeah, that's mainly where the influences come from. And as far as where the ideas come from, is just I don't know. I mean, just kind of random. I've always been a creative person and I have certain tools I use to try to be creative about designing a character. But it's rare that I have an idea of a character. It usually happens when I'm just doodling and start drawing, just, not having any ideas and then just start drawing on paper and then things happen and accidents happen and sooner or later a character comes out.
Wow,
That's really cool.
Yeah, that is really, really cool. And I find it really interesting that you draw inspiration from Miyazaki because there have been times where I do as well. That's an art style that I've always admired.
Yeah, I mean, his stuff is just so fresh. It's like it's so creative and it's beautiful, but also there's a lot of really quirky stuff in there. There's some of the ideas are like even like borderline stupid. And that's what I love about it. It's just like it's so weird and like bizarre. So I kind of try to do some of that in Skylanders as well.
That makes sense, and it actually does. Now that you mention that, it does show through like a lot.
Oh yeah.
Oh, good,
Yeah, definitely
good. I'm
does.
glad.
One thing that you also mentioned about nature is you also had to design a couple tech Skylanders as well, and ones that were kind of very machine based.
Mhm.
So how did you go about trying to create some of those, like Drill Sergeant and Chopper, and just various characters like that?
Yeah, so I've always been really fascinated by machines and robots. I was definitely one of those kids growing up, just taking everything apart, trying to figure out how it works, combining stuff, making things. And then there was a brief period of a couple years where I was building steam powered robots. So I was like thinking about how like steampunk machines will actually work. I did a whole bunch of research into it and just one day decided, hey, I'm going to build a miniature version of it and see if it actually works. And so I built a whole bunch of those. So I've always just, I guess the machine part of it comes pretty easy for me because it's one of my passions. I was a mechanical engineering major who really failed miserably because it was it wasn't enough hands-on, and so the way my brain works is very visual. So if it's not visual, it's just I can't quite grasp it. So I started doing engineering because I figured that's something that I'm naturally good at and could do it. And turned out I'm pretty good with when you put something in front of me that I can like figure out, by just tinkering, but not like, once you get to like calculus 3 or whatever, it's a bit much for my brain. So yeah, the mechanical stuff has always been a strong interest, so there's definitely a lot of steampunk kind of stuff in Skylands. The whole Archean thing is just, it's all that steampunk inspired style, right? Like that gold trim, on everything is definitely inspired by that.
Yeah, I mean, you can definitely see the steampunk kind of feel coming across,
Yes.
especially with the Archeans. And I think some of the like Spyro's Adventure characters for the tech element as well, you can really, really feel it in there.
Yeah, definitely. I kind of draw from whatever is in my life, right? So definitely the Steam stuff just kind of, I can't help it. It just kind of appears, in it. And luckily with this franchise, it really worked well. Kind of worked well with the style and the flexibility. Because Skylanders is really anything goes except super high tech, right? So low tech. Old tech works just perfectly fine, and luckily I had a bunch of experience actually making real steam power robots.
And I do think that shows. Now, I guess out of curiosity, since you say that you have played around with tech stuff, like steampunk robots, did you happen to have any hand in dealing with the light core technology?
The short answer is sort of. So the way it works is that I was the person that was responsible for coming up with characters. But because of my tinkering background, I did do a lot of tinkering, and we had 3D printers and stuff like that. So Robert Leyland is the guy behind all that stuff. He's a real math scientist. I thought I was a math scientist until I met him. He was responsible for doing all the electronics. He was a programmer who had a strong hobby in electronics, and so in this project he ended up building a lot of the prototypes and actually end up becoming the person that come up with all these innovations in tech. And so I sat next to him, and two of us would just like brainstorm and just like bounce ideas back and forth. And so a lot of that stuff came from him. The light core thing, it was magical. He was just like one day just kind of told me like, we're getting all this power from. So basically, how it works is our RFID, right? We have a big coil in the portal. This is kind of spoiler alert, science coming. This is going to ruin the magic a bit, but there's a big coil on the portal, right? It's like that's why it's circular, and that coil can transmit energy into another little coil, which is inside the toy. Like it's a RFID tag, and so it's enough to transfer the energy to it, and then it can kind of bounce the energy back and tell the portal a set of information, right? So there's a wireless energy going back and forth. So anyway, one day he told me, I think we can actually power something with that, more than just reading tags. I think we could maybe like light up something or get a motor running. And so I was like, yeah, whatever. And then one day he just built it. Like, it's just crazy. He just sitting there soldering away and making all these little tags, and then he puts a light on it and he shows it to me, and I was just floored. And at the time, Paul Ritchie, the CEO of our company, was out of town on business or whatever, and I literally just sent him a text with a video of this thing working. I was like, oh my God, this is it. So the first thing we did is I cut off poor Prison Break's arms and stuck a light in there, the LED in there, and just to see it light up something other than just a little LED light, right? And so we always joked and kind of always said that Prison Break is the MVP of the franchise, because he was the first one that we used to do light core, and later on for Trap Team, for the traps are actually, if you look at the size of the traps, the bottom part of it, the crystal part, is actually exactly Prison Break's arm, like the size and everything just happened to, it worked out perfectly. We tried so many different things with the traps, and then end up doing the light core thing with the crystal end. But yeah, so I'm not directly responsible for coming up with the tech, but I was working with Robert on that. And so whatever tech that he comes up with, I would just like, okay, can we put it here? Can we do this? Can we try that? And then we'll just like 3D print a bunch of stuff and like cut things off, glue things together, and just kind of make a rough prototype to test.
Wow.
Yeah, that's pretty incredible. Now that you mentioned the traps, I'm like curious, what were the previous designs that you tried before you came up with the white core crystal thing?
Yeah, so that's an interesting question. So the whole idea of it in originally trapping, characters is like, well, how do we know that there's a character in here, right? We knew that we didn't want it just to have another toy. How can you tell who's in there and what's the magic? How do you believe that there's something trapped in here, right? So obviously the first thing we thought of is like, okay, we'll put an LED screen, right? Actually put it in, it's like a Tamagotchi kind of thing, right? Like that's a good way to kind of show who I have in here, right? In this little device. So that was one of the first things that we did, and that ended up just would have cost too much money. We would have to have sold it for a lot of money, and it wouldn't make sense, right? Having all that tech into a little thing that you used to trap a villain. But we did actually do a prototype. There's a little screen, like I don't know, it's probably like an inch by half an inch screen, like a Tamagotchi kind of thing. Very few pixels that actually animated by hand and just have a character, with a few frames of animation to show that. And so, but that, that didn't work. So then we tried like, okay, idea of a cage, like literal cage. So we did, cages. But the brilliant thing of that is the audio team actually said, well, what if we can do audio? We're like, yeah, audio is not enough. We need something visual. So we didn't think much of it. And then a couple of days later, the audio guys just like, hey, you come over here, check this out. And they showed us exactly the transfer of going from the screen, the sound going into a portal with sound, which we already built, a portal with sound within, just because we kind of knew that might be the direction we might be going. So they did this prototype, and we just were all floored, just like, that works. I totally believe that the sound coming from that to the this little thing I'm sold. Like, that was magical. So then we had that, and then the last thing we needed to do is, how do we represent the actual trap? And that's where we went back to the whole lighting up of the traps, kind of thing.
Yeah, that's just really, really cool to hear, because I just, like, the first time that I saw that happen, I remember watching like the reveal that happened for Trap Team in New York, because that got posted on the like Skylanders like YouTube channel. Like, the reveal for that was just so cool, watching that happen. And it's just, even as an adult,
Yeah,
many years later, watching that,
it was magical for us. The first time I saw it, it was just like, I think it was like a little Wii mode or something. I don't remember the exact thing, but I was bought in that we captured this thing. And it wasn't even what you saw with all the magic lights and everything. This was just like a tag, like literally a little disc, and I believe that it was in there. So yeah, I mean, I think that's one of the strengths of TFB, was a lot of very, very creative, brilliant people that were able to prototype things up quickly to prove whether or not it's going to work. Literally on paper, before you know what a trap team is and what traps are and all that kind of stuff, you just think of like, how do you capture a thing? You would think that you need to have somehow, or at least I was convinced, and most of us were convinced, that you need somehow to represent it as a picture. And we're thinking about like, okay, stickers that we can put on, and what if you capture another character? Okay, well, give them a whole sheet of stickers. We had a lot of different ideas, but in the end, that magic was the audio. The audio is most of it, and then definitely what was going on screen and what was flashing and talking on the portal too was magical.
So you've worked on a lot of Skylanders over the years. Do you have any that stand out as designs that you're more proud of than any of the others?
Yeah, I mean, it's a tough question, because it's hard to pick. There's been so many. There's definitely ones that are really, really important, like Stealth Elf and Eruptor and Trigger Happy kind of thing, because they were, and Chop Chop, they were some of the first Skylanders that helped cement the look and feel for the rest of the thing. So I always have a soft spot for them. But I think the one that speaks to me today still is Chopper. There's just something about that form factor that I love.
Okay.
Yeah, I love Chopper.
Chopper's
I think
amazing.
he's very cool.
Yeah, so most of the Skylanders, like my philosophy has always been like it needs to be really simple, right? Like, this is a kids franchise, so the character description generically should be really simple, right? It shouldn't have too many notes, like too many things happening at once. It's just I don't know, a character with squid guns, a sea character with squid guns, kind of thing, right? But Chopper he broke the rule because he's a T-Rex. He's got these like assisted legs, mech legs. He's got helicopters, blades, and then he's got missiles. So that's too many notes. It should be 2 notes, maybe 3, but he kind of broke it. But for whatever reason, it works because I think he's so compact. That's kind of what I like about him. I think like the whole style of Skylanders is like chunky. They're very stubby for the most part, and to kind of stubify a T-Rex was a challenge, and it was really fun to do.
I can only imagine.
He was actually a character that one of the designers came to me doing Giants and asked me, he's like, because everyone gives me ideas, and it's like, oh, I've been thinking about a character like this, or it should be like that, So I get a lot of that, and a designer came to me and said, what about a T-Rex with guns? That's cool. And so I thought about it, and I drew some pictures. This is back in Giants. I was thinking about making it into a giant character, a T-Rex kind of with guns. And I drew some pictures of it, but I had a really hard time. Like, you have to think of character in terms of fitting into a box, into a blister pack. And T-Rexes are just doesn't work well because they're very horizontal, they're very long, right? They have long tail. I would have to curve it around. It would be hard to fit it in the box. And so I started stubifying it, like making it shorter and shorter, more stubby kind of feeling, but as a giant. It just didn't work out. So by the time Trap Team came out, I was like kind of revisiting that idea and just like, okay, what if I just go extreme? Just make it into a ball, like as chubby as possible. And I think that's probably why I like it, because it's like the extreme version of what I think a Skylander is.
So I guess going off of that question, are there any Skylanders designs that you look back on that you wish you could change?
There's ones that I think didn't perform well that I learned from. There's definitely been characters that had gone through a lot of changes to a point where I wasn't completely happy with them at the end. There's voices above me that once in a while will have opinions, and sometimes I have to, follow through with that. And then there's a lot of characters that were actually cut that I wish we didn't. See, Dino Ring he didn't sell well, but I really liked his character. But he was the most expensive toy for us to build ever, because it was in our first game. So like we were just learning this whole making toy process. I didn't know anything about toys before this, and so it was a learning process. So he had a ton of paint ops, which means each paint operation costs money, and then no matter how much we make the character, they sell for the same price. So he was really, really expensive because he had a lot of paint operations that cost a lot of money. So if I were able to go back today, I think I would know and be smarter about how we paint it, so it's a little bit more cost efficient. Maybe make him even cooler looking. There was a elephant character that never came out that I wish we kept. But no, I think I'm proud of just about all of them. There's not many. I think a character called Sunburn, I think he could have been better. I wish I had a little bit more time to design him a little bit better, so that the colors, I think it's a little bit contrasty. I think I would like to do something different with him, or maybe, again, a lot of the characters from the first game, I just didn't know enough. And now going back, I think I would have made smarter choices about how to paint the characters.
Interesting, because personally, I like Sunburn's color scheme.
Oh, good.
Yeah, because he kind of has that red, yellow, blue kind of color scheme going on. He has that triadic color scheme.
Yeah.
And I think that pops. I think it looks nice, personally.
I think I would have probably done them in a little bit more flame-like, so maybe have so a lot of times we have fire characters were molded and more translucent, and then we paint on top of it to kind of make it a little bit more fiery looking. So I would have loved to experiment with, kind of his wings or something to that. It's like a little bit more fiery feeling.
Oh yeah, that actually would have been cool. Like that would have been a neat change to like his figure. But I do wish we had gotten to see more Sunburn because he is the only one that never got like a repose or light core or anything.
Yeah. So a lot of that is based on performance, really. It's like if the character sells really well, then of course there's going to be a repose. We know that it strikes a chord with the audience, and they will probably want a upgraded version. And the characters that don't perform well, every game we try to come up with a whole bunch of characters, and then only a small set of the previous game, right? So there's only a certain amount of them that we can do a repose and light core and stuff like that.
I guess just as like a random side tangent question about the reposes, in Trap Team there were only 5, when usually you would get like 1 or 2, or I guess in the case of Giants 3 of each element. But 3 of the elements in Trap Team didn't even like get reposes. Was that due to time or?
It's always time. A lot of the decisions are just purely based on, okay, we want to do so many new characters, and again, it's performance and time, right? Like can we actually make it and put out a quality product? Because some of the reposes, by the time we do like 2 of them, 3 of them, it's like, what else are we going to do? It's going to look really similar to the previous version, So a lot of times it's like just kind of lack of excitement for another repose of the character. But also it's just like, based on like, are people buying them versus, but did they prefer the new characters that are brand new and they haven't experienced before, right? So it's a balance. But for Trap Team, I think that was mostly time. Trying to remember back, I think it was just like we knew we wanted to put out so many characters, and the amount of time that we had and everything was like, okay, let's do a little bit less of the reposes.
I'm curious as to how you went about deciding what weapon types would go to each character.
That's a really great question. Again, I don't have anything kind of planned out. And so a lot of times it's just wing it as we go, right? So I'll start drawing characters, and it's like, oh, well, I got 2, 3 sword guys. Maybe we should start thinking ones that can shoot long range missiles or something, And a lot of times, even the characters don't have a clear weapon, right? They're not holding a weapon. And just by looking at it, a dragon is like, what? Does it breathe fire? Does it shoot? We don't know. So luckily for me, I don't think about that too much. My only concern is how cool is it going to be for this character to be a toy? That's my really only concern. And just kind of trying to make sure that it hits well with our core audience, which is pretty small kids. And then that gets handed over to maulers and then animators and designers, and then they figure out what the attacks are. So sometimes it's like they will come to me and say, we need a range character, or we're thinking about this. And once in a while, they'll even show me, like, we've been prototyping this thing. It looks like this. And then they'll show it to me, and I'll go, okay, does it have to be a dragon? Because you use a dragon. It's like, nope, it can be anything. We just want it to work like this, So Igniter was a perfect example of that. They actually prototyped a fire thing that runs out, and comes back. And I think they prototype it into a dragon or something like that. And they just kind of show me, okay, here are the moves we're kind of doing. Then they just use a stand-in character for that. And so once I saw that, I was like, that's cool. So I started designing for that. So there's been times like that where they'll show me something. But for the most part, the poor designers just kind of get the character from me, and then they just come up with something brilliant, So I don't actually think too much about the different weapon types or anything. I just kind of start doodling and things happen.
So what were the inspirations behind some of the variant color schemes? So why were certain figures chosen for variants?
Again, it's based on mostly what resonates with the audience, right? If a toy is sold well, then we may choose a variant. And sometimes a vendor would choose it, So we have like exclusive for Walmart, Target, whatever it is, right? I don't know who either them or our marketing team and their marketing team, whoever it is, they decide and they tell me like, oh, we need these 3 characters and we need variants. So then we go in and we use this program called Keyshot, which is like a 3D program. It's kind of like Photoshop that's like 3D and you can change colors really easily. So then we do a bunch of color combinations and try to figure out what might be a cool thing. But the whole goal is just like it needs to be unique. It needs to look different than the original versions. And once in a while, like a variant will come out great, like better than the original color scheme, in my opinion. Those are things that are fairly easy for us to do. That doesn't require a lot of time from us, and we can produce more toys. And it's pretty easy to do the toy because it's just a color change. Usually, the paint operations are roughly the same or really similar. We just change what kind of paint we use, what color and stuff. And then in game, it's super easy to just redo a texture map. And so it's just something that's fairly easy for us to do.
Did you have a hand in making any of the chase variants, the kind of like translucent ones? And I guess was the process of picking those the same way, or was that a little bit more random?
Yeah, no, I was not involved in any of those. So those are just, I actually don't know who. I assume it's between marketing team and they just go right into the production, the toy production side of things. So a lot of times I don't even see them. They're just like, okay, we just made a whole bunch of these translucent ones, or we flocked it with this fur. Whatever it is, they just kind of, it shows up and they're like, hey, we did this. And then they send it to us and we're like, oh, okay, cool.
Because some of those turn out looking pretty neat too, like the Rock Candy Pinata variant. I love that one.
Yeah.
So I guess another question based on color schemes is, why did the legendary color scheme shift in Imaginators? Because originally it was like that black and gold, but then in Imaginators it becomes red and gold. So what was the reason for that shift?
That's a great question. I don't remember. Again, this is many years ago. But I would guess that it's probably too close to the senseis. We were mostly black and a lot of gold on them too. But I don't remember why.
Yeah, it wouldn't surprise me because a lot of the senseis, like, I mean, they all had like the gold belt and then like the black like costume. So that would make sense.
So they're just already too close and it'd be kind of confusing. I think that's what happened, but I don't remember.
For you, what was the best part about working on the Skylanders team?
I think, one of the things I took for granted, I think now looking back, is how many really brilliant, creative people there were and how easy it was to work with everyone. It was a very fun group. We're just kind of silly group of folks that love doing what we do, and like I said, like the trap thing, for example, with the audio team, like, people are proactive, right? They just kind of have an idea and they're brilliant enough to be able to just kind of prototype it real quick. So in the beginning of Skylanders, like, we prototyped the toys to show Activision, and then they show that to Target and whoever, And that was a really good example of the Paul Ritchie. He was, one of his hobbies was actually modeling and casting little characters from clay. I didn't know anything about that, and he showed me how to do it, and then we just did a whole bunch of them. And so we had these like little characters that were like hand done, molded and casted and painted and glued together, and that we were sending out as examples of just kind of, because you absolutely have to have that magic moment to show. You can't explain to someone what Skylanders is, right, without putting a character on the portal and seeing it on the screen and start playing there. That magic needed to be physical, so we had to prototype that out. So that's a good example of something like, we just had all these brilliant people in one place that are all just kind of really not only brilliant, but like easy to get along with and no egos. We're just a bunch of people having fun. And so we just tinkered away and all the stars were lined up for some reason. And we just had all the right people that had all these weird hobbies and talents that contributed into this thing. So I would say that's probably the most amazing thing through the process, is not only the rewards of like just hearing people like you guys, like hearing about your experiences with your kids and stuff like that. That's super rewarding too. And just the experience with working with some like really amazing people is priceless.
Going off of that, what was an average day like at the Toys for Bob offices while working on Skylanders?
There's a lot of pressure for me because I'm the guy with the ideas, so there's like this constant pressure of like, oh my God, I better do something great, because like there's so much hinging on the way characters look, how the toys look. So I would say I come into work, drink a whole bunch of coffee, catch up with the folks, my friends and stuff, and then I just draw. I draw all day. A lot of times I get pulled into different meetings with something on fire, something important that for whatever reason needs my attention. But my main love part is actually the drawing part, the doodling part, kind of something really, really cool. And then, so like things go in phases, right? So I have the kind of concept phase. In order for us to make certain deadlines and get all this stuff made, the next 2 weeks I need to pump out X amount of characters, kind of thing. So there's that phase. And then there's phase of like in between projects, Robert and I would just like tinker around with different electronics and different toys and stuff, right? There's a period doing that too. And then there's a period where it's like just nothing but toy production, working with paint ops. I'm looking at spreadsheets all day long, trying to save a few cents, so we can afford to don't paint this part so that we can paint this other part. What if we molded this part and that piece together and we change the pose a little bit so that we can get a better this and that. So it's a lot of that kind of toy production thing. And then there's a whole side of it, which is working with modelers, which is great. Like I love that part of it too. Like actually seeing drawing. A lot of times they're just really bad drawings. They're just chicken scratch. I don't have time to like flush out every little detail. Just kind of give it to the modelers and like, okay, make that character. And then they'll come back to me and it's like, what do you think of this? And I'll kind of design and kind of work it out with them on the fly. It's like I didn't draw up the back of the character and they made something and it's like, no, more like this, or like that's great, whatever it is. So there's a lot of that going on too. So I guess a typical day is depending on the month, the week, but those are the kind of main things I did.
Yeah, I imagine that so much effort had to go into figuring out what pose would look best and which one would fit in the box and all that kind of stuff as well.
Yeah, so what usually happens, here's the pipeline. I draw the character, I hand it over to a modeler. The modeler makes the mesh, and then they kind of give me a really super low res version, temporary version with no textures, just a gray mesh. That gets rigged loosely and quickly by the rigger, and it gets to me. I pose the character. I pose it so that it fits in a blister pack. It physically has to fit, right? So if the character has a sword, you can't like stick it straight out with his arm straight, unless the character is kind of small or like do something crazy with the pose. And then I give that back to the modelers, and then they make a high-res version of that with all the little details and everything. And then that gets 3D printed. And then now we have a physical thing that we're holding in our hands. We double check to make sure it does fit in the blister pack, in the packaging. And then we can do changes then. Because once you hold it in your hand, that's when you go, oh man, that's way too small. That's smaller than I thought. Or the face is not looking up at you enough when you're holding it. Whatever it is, we do changes to the pose or the size or whatever it is, and we do multiple prints until it's perfect. Then we break that character up in little pieces so that we could paint it correctly. Again, we use this program called Keyshot. It makes that photorealistic render of the character. Like from Giants on, all the pictures of the toys and the packaging is all renders, it's not photographs. And that's all done in Keyshot. So we can visualize everything. And then we do a 360 spin of it, rendered in all different views. So you can like spin it around and like actually see the whole thing and kind of get a really good feel of what it would look like once it's in full color. And then we go through a whole toy production side, which we work with factories on like how do we break up the characters. And again, goes into the whole spreadsheet thing where you have to figure out every paint operation costs a certain amount of money, and then we kind of try to make the best looking character possible. And then that gets prototyped and then sent to us, and then I sit there and go, nope, that color's wrong. We gave you the Pantone and we double checked and that's the wrong color. Or sometimes it's the right color, but I just picked the wrong. Like that's not gold enough. That's a little too orange or whatever it is. And then we go back and forth on that quite a bit until we get a perfect like gold standard toy. And then we send that to the factory and we go, okay, make a bunch of these. So that's kind of really how the whole process works.
Now, going off of that, how long was the production process from concept to final figure? How long did all of that take?
So the project altogether takes 2 years for the most part. Giants was short, but otherwise we have 2 years to do it. So in that time, everything has to be done basically in about a year into it. So that it can hit September. So by fall, like by Christmas time, we should be wrapped up, and by Chinese New Year we have to be done in order for them to make enough of them and put on a ship and everything to ship it here. So I would say that's every single toy character has to be done in roughly a year.
That's definitely quick.
Yeah.
The enemies and the bosses and enemies, they can go longer, right? Because then we got another 9 months or whatever after that to do. So we concentrate on definitely the starter pack characters, or the first characters I do ends up being starter pack because those have to be even further up because we have to make more of them. Those come even closer. I would say they probably needed to be done, in about a year.
Do you have any advice for aspiring artists who want to get into graphic design work?
So what I do is concept art, right? Character concept art. There's a lot of different things you could do. On the character side, you can be a modeler, you can be a concept artist, you can be an animator, right? And you can be a rigger. So those are different disciplines there. Or you can do environments, right? And then there's environment artists, concept artists, environment modelers, effects artists, and stuff like that. So as far as concept art is concerned, which is mainly what I've been doing basically since Skylanders. Before Skylanders, I was an animator. So it wasn't until Skylanders I became the character concept guy. So for that, I would say I think it's a very competitive field. You don't need a lot. Like in a team, in a studio, you might need a couple concept artists, and you need a lot of animators or a lot of environment artists, and so just pure number wise, it's very few, and then there's a lot of really great, amazing character people, character concept artists. So the competition is really hard, but it's super rewarding. So obviously everyone wants to do it. I would say it's hard to find your voice. You kind of study great masters and these amazing artists, and you kind of copy, for a long time. And then it's kind of hard to what's my style, And I still, to this day, I still feel like I'm just copying other people's style too. But I think, once you get enough of your different influences and you kind of come up with a look, because when I was hiring concept artists, you get a whole lot of portfolios in, and a lot of times they look very, very similar. All the college kids are graduating. They probably have the same assignments, and they're doing things that they think what people want to see. But what you end up getting is just all these portfolios look like they came from the same school, probably the same class, because they all look really, really similar. So I think it's hard to stand out. So I think finding that voice, and you kind of have to have your skill. College teach you skill, right? They teach you how to render, how to perspective, color theory, and anatomy, all this kind of stuff. That's all they teach you. But the thing that they don't teach you, which is super important in this job, is the creativity part. I don't know why that's just not a thing. So I think you should have really great ideas. So definitely work on, going back to, we were talking about Miyazaki earlier. It's Miyazaki's work when you see it because it's so clever and so quirky and beautiful, right? So that's super hard to do, right? Obviously, but that's what you should strive for. I think there's been too much emphasis on you need to render exactly this way, or you need to show off your skills and this and that. But I think it's important to kind of show off your creativity of a character. I think that's super, super important.
That's some really great advice.
That's phenomenal advice.
When I was hiring concept artists for Skylanders, we would get all these amazing portfolios, people that are just amazing. They can dance around me, no problem. And I would go, okay, well, there's nothing too relevant to Skylanders, but they're so good, they must be able to do it, you know. And then and then we give them a art test, and then a lot of them fail. They don't have the creativity side of it, because that's kind of what we're looking for, is like someone that can bring ideas to the table. By the time you come for an interview, your work, your skill part of it is way better than I could ever achieve. Otherwise, you wouldn't be here. But what I'm testing for is really how good is your creativity. If I say, hey, make something, you know, really cool. So the test was that I would show them, or I would tell them, we have Cyclops in the game. Here's what the Cyclops look like, and we'll give them a bunch of concept art. So if you never play the game, you kind of go, okay, well, here's 6 different characters, right? Enemy Cyclops. So then I would tell them the goal is to make another Cyclops, but doesn't look like any of these, not a copy, not like that guy with a different clothing kind of thing, right? It's like, I want a different Cyclops, because our Cyclops are really different. You got these gigantic guys, you got little cute guys. So the test is like, make a Cyclops, and I want a ranged weapon, something that shoots from very far away, that goes out and comes back, kind of thing. And they can do whatever they want. It's like, show me something different. And so what we end up with is like different categories of tests will come back. You know, one camp is people that just like, well, they just drew the same guy, right, as one of the lower guys, with a big boomerang, because that's what I asked, right, like some ranged weapon. So there was no creativity, but they nailed the style down, because it looks just like the example that I gave them, just with different colors or different outfits or whatever. So those people are fails, because they either didn't follow directions, or they weren't creative enough, right? And then the other camp is like, well, they came up with something super creative, but it looks nothing like the Cyclops in our game, right? Like, it's just not the same look, not even close to the same style. So those people get rejected too. So what I was looking for is, you can kind of nail the style enough, and you can be really creative about what this attack is, like what the thing is that you shoot or throw or whatever it is, you know, and they can come up with something really creative there. So that was the test.
That's cool. I mean, my brain's already like spinning.
Yeah.
Like, it's like, how do I come up with like a Cyclops that that like is in the Skylanders style, but is also like very unique from them, because there are a lot of like cool Cyclops designs in that game.
I can't draw, but I literally just sat here and envisioned like one of the little Cyclops enemies, but as a ninja with like blow darts.
Right. Yeah, that's cool. That's a good idea. So a lot of times we get from designers will say, hey, we need some characters that look like this, you know, or does this thing, and they'll tell us something, you know, like a Cyclops with a boomerang. And so then we always draw what they ask for. Here's a Cyclops with a boomerang. But then you kind of go, okay, I understand what they're looking for. They're looking for a thing with long range. What if it's not boomerang? What if a Cyclops is throwing another Cyclops, you know, or something crazy and dumb and stupid, right? And we'll just draw that out. And a lot of times those crazy ideas is what wins, because if it makes you chuckle, if a designer look at it and go, that's funny, like, we got you, you know, because that's kind of what Skylanders is, right? Like these like really dumb, stupid ideas that are just like, what the hell am I looking at? And so those kind of ideas usually win. So we kind of find out what designers are looking for, so that it works with their game, you know, their level, and it makes it fun. But then it's like, okay, how much room do we have to play with here? So it's rare that we give them exactly what they want and they pick that. They usually pick whatever the stupidest, funniest thing is.
I mean, it sounds fun to me.
Right, it sounds like a blast.
Well, it's always a blast until you have the pressure, right?
Well, yeah.
When it's like, oh my God, I got to perform, monkey. You know, like, it kind of takes away a little bit of the fun, because you're like, oh, you have to make it work. You have to come up with something great, and you know, it doesn't always happen, but you try to do your best. But if we had more time, I think I would have enjoyed it more. But a lot of times it's just like, man, we got to crank this out. But a lot of times, you know, like I work well under pressure, and my team too. So sometimes some of the best ideas came out because we're just desperate, you know?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Procrastination will do that sometime.
Right. It's also, I think, you know, designing Skylanders, some of the later characters are some of my favorites, because I've used up all the characters I can think of in the first game. So by the second, third, like it's just like I don't know. We've done everything already. There's no new. I can't think of another idea, and that's when the good ideas come out because they're so unusual and different. Because you're pulling from not your natural state, right?
Yeah, and I think that shows as well. I think it's pretty synonymous among a lot of the fan base that the character design and Imaginators, like the whole like roster there, is really solid.
No, thanks. Trap Team and Imaginators are both like I think we were a fine oil machine by then. We kind of have everything kind of figured out and worked out. So it was just coming up with cool ideas. It was cool.
Yeah, like Barbella. It's a really amazing lineup.
Let me ask you guys then, like, what's your favorite character?
My
Let me ask in two ways. What's your favorite looking character and what's your favorite playing character? Because they might be different, right?
Okay, this is easy for me. So my favorite looking character is Scarlet Ninjini. There is no contest there. I didn't even have to think about that.
That was one when I was telling you about like variants. That was the one that I was thinking of when I said like, the variant is actually way better than the original.
Yes, and when it comes to my favorite to play as, Barbella, hands down. Once again, no contest. Didn't have to think about it.
That's so interesting because I think my favorite design is Barbella, like the one that I think looks the coolest. But then the one that I like to play as is Camo. But yeah, like there is something about Barbella. Barbella is just an outstanding character.
Yeah, she was great. Like she was a really fun design and something was in my head for a long time. She was based off of a meme of a weightlifter girl that I saw one day, and it's like, wow, that's really cool. She's like a really small girl, but she was like lifting, and I was like, we should have a really strong girl like weightlifter kind of thing, and it fits well with the the big weapon thing. So one of the things about Skylanders is like the weapons are really important, so like we oversize things. So like the whole idea of having, kind of weights like that you throw around was something kind of just worked.
It did.
Yeah.
I'll give you a really cool insight on her. So originally her weights was spherical, not like cubes, but we had to change it because of safety concerns. There's a choking hazard, even though this isn't like for 3-year-olds or whatever. Like we know that these boys are going to end up at homes where there's little kids, little sisters and brothers are really young, and that might put some of these things in their mouth. So we have to go through a lot of safety related things. And one of the things that was a big no was like that was actually a perfect diameter for your throat, and you can't have a sphere because that completely cuts out your airway. So we had to change it to a cube, which actually worked out great. But that was an interesting thing that we had to do.
That makes a lot of sense, though. Like, safety is important.
Yeah.
We went through so many safety things with the traps too, because a lot of the traps are like the size, like the really ornate ones are fine, but we have ones that are just like a big sphere basically on top. There was one that was an eyeball, and it was just a big sphere. It's like, nope, we gotta change it and tweak it.
Makes sense.
Although I do think that in the case of Arbella, with her being of the earth element anyway, the square dumbbell, like the ends of it, like that totally makes sense because like square, you feel like square, that's going to be more of like an earth kind of like rough kind of shape to it.
Like I said, I think I like it better, but it wasn't a natural choice because like, well, of course if you want to draw like the old school weights, they're spherical, right? And that's kind of where it came from. But the square thing is like, it actually worked out. I think I liked it better because it was different, and it feel the weight of it, like you said, it feels right.
Yeah. And I guess also kind of out of curiosity, since we have you here, what was the process of redesigning Spyro for Skylanders?
So at first, Skylanders was just kind of, we were in between projects, and Activision said to us, like, we have the Spyro franchise, and can you do something with that? And then they also said at the time the Wii peripherals were really hot at the time. The skateboards, the Wii Fit boards and stuff like that. So they're like, well, think of some peripheral thing too, while you're thinking about that. And so that's kind of where Skylanders came from. So in the beginning, we were doing a lot of different things with Spyro. We were at one point going to make him like a little bit more edgy, more adult oriented, and at one point they were going to be like Spyro was going to be like this miniature thing that ended up being a toy. So we started prototyping that early on, and then once we have this like huge range of characters for Skylanders, it kind of felt like, well, Spyro isn't really important or part of this universe, or it doesn't need to be, and this feels like a different thing because it's so big, and it's kind of weird for Spyro to be not the main character but like a small set, like one of many hero characters kind of thing. So we kind of think at one point almost ditched him. We had like changed his texture to a red dragon and stuff like that, and then Activision really wanted to keep Spyro in and really wanted to use the name because there's some recognition there, right? And so just Skylanders, Spyro's Adventure. So there's some people are familiar with that, so they felt like that was a good move to kind of keep him in. So redesigning him at the time when it first came out, when it first trailers and stuff first came out, oh man, I got so much bad. I had almost death threats kind of thing, right? It was just people hated it. People absolutely, or a lot of the very vocal people really hated the way that Spyro looked. And I redesigned them again, kind of under the assumption that we're gonna make this whole new set of characters, and so like I wanted to kind of fit in this universe and kind of give him a little edge, so that he's really cute, but not like super friendly kind of look that he had before. And so I was kind of going in a different direction for a different audience. But man, I got tore apart by the Spyro fans, as I'm sure you guys have seen, and you might be in the same camp. But later on, TFB, we did actually do a proper Spyro game. So I think the studio redeemed itself for those people. But yeah, the redesigning of Spyro was not for the Spyro fan, because we were kind of making Skylanders. We were kind of come up with a new look. But yeah, the Spyro hardcore fans, or most of the fans of Spyro, just did not take to it.
Yeah, I mean, I certainly know quite a few people who are not happy about it.
Yeah.
But for me personally, as someone that likes Spyro and Skylanders, I kind of just view Skylanders Spyro as like his own kind of alternate universe kind of thing.
Yeah.
It's just like I see him as Spyro, but I also see him kind of as his own thing. And as you said, like he is like, his face is a little bit more like rounded, like all of his features are a little bit more not as like rugged. So like I think you're drawing him for a different audience. You're drawing him for like a little bit of a younger audience. So I think in many ways you're trying to design him to be looking a little bit more friendlier, and I think that comes across well in the design. But also, like, I really like what you did with Reignited, because then you kind of went back to the classic Spyro. You gave him more angles, gave him more rough edges. So I like both of them. I think they're both great. They're just great in different ways, I think.
Yeah, I think Reignited feels like Spyro updated to today's standards, right? Today's tech, today's hardware power. If they could have done it, they would have done it like that. So it felt true to the original. Definitely Skylanders was a reboot. It was a reimagined, or like a reinterpretation of it in the new world, right? And where we have this huge cast of characters. And the original Spyro wouldn't have fit in. I would have had to do all the characters differently, so that they all look like Spyro characters, which I didn't want to do. So I didn't felt like that was the right thing to do for the audience.
Yeah, and I think that makes a lot of sense.
It does. As the first 10 years of Skylanders draws to a close, if you could say one thing to the fans regarding how you feel about the franchise and the community around it, what would it be?
I think most of the people that are listening to this are probably kids at the time, and the guys have grown up to probably be adults now. So every kid has a thing that they're into, right? Like you're kind of obsessed about one or two things. And for some people it's sports, some people it's like magic cards or whatever it is, right? And for those of you that are listening to this, it's Skylanders. It's really rewarding for me to know that you guys grew up with this, and it's an important part of your childhood that you live with these characters and played with these toys and the game. I know what that feels like because I have my own, right? And so it's been a really amazing process for me, and really rewarding to know that even now that you're listening to this, that you still love and care about this old franchise and these old characters. I guess I would just say thank you. Thanks for loving the franchise.
It's definitely something that means a lot to me, and I know it means a lot to a lot of other people too. To this day, like I have like posters for Skylanders. I've got, of course, all the figures, and you were such a huge part of that because you drew those characters. You were such a huge part of creating the world, and we definitely owe you like a special thanks too.
Oh, pleasure is mine. I mean, it was a rare opportunity that I could make a bunch of characters and kind of create this sense of this world of characters, and for it to do well in the market and actually sold well was really gratifying. Like people actually appreciate and love this universe, that we created. So that's great. It's always great to hear that.
Thank you so much for joining us. It's been a pleasure talking to you, and we're so happy that you were able to take time out of your day to be able to speak with us.
Yes.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thank you.
This segment might be over, but don't touch that dial, baby. Stay tuned for another segment of the Skylanders 10th anniversary celebration. Until then, this is Chill Bill, signing off.
We've gotten a response, and it's positive.
Oh my god, okay.
Yeah.
Response to what?
Oh wow, okay.
I'm like freaking out right now.
Right? Oh my god, okay.
Wait, context?
Sorry. All right. So the person that drew all the Skylanders is
Ooh.
going to guest star in this episode.
Ooh, that is cool.